Hello, everyone, and welcome to Walker Reads. I am your host, MJ Walker. Today, I'll be bringing you the next installation in the series, Rabinoe, Wizard Extraordinaire. If you are enjoying what you are listening and watching, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It truly helps me to develop my channel. Without further ado, I bring you the next episode in Rabinoe, Wizard Extraordinaire. Episode 20, Whispers on the Wind. It took Rabinoe and Eris the better part of several days to return to the outskirts of Roseford, where Dirkley had taken them into custody. It was midday on the third day when they had finally reached the road and turned to continue their journey westward. The trip had thus far been a silent and somber one, both of them pondering the implications of being chained to the throne. Rabinoe was relieved to have survived his first encounter with the king, and he was even more relieved to get out of Ohangpor. The fact that the king had known his surname still rattled Rabinoe, and he wondered just how much the man knew about him. He supposed that as long as he towed the line when the king came calling, he would not have to find out. And hopefully, by the time he was ready to throw off the yoke of servitude, whatever information the king held would be irrelevant or insignificant. Rabbit, Eris said, breaking into his thoughts. Rabinoe replied. I think we need to resume your training, she said softly. I do believe it will help to flush the past few days from your mind. Rabinoe shrugged, a movement the cat felt intimately from her perch on his shoulders. If you say so. But we have to keep moving. Our supplies are dwindling, and I am not going back to Roseford for more. That's fine, she said. What I plan to teach you can be learned on the road. Okay, Rabinoe said. Then what is it you plan to teach me? Today, Eris began, I would like to show you how the wind can be your friend. The wind? Rabinoe asked incredulously. How can the wind be my friend? Very carefully, Eris answered cryptically. But only if you can learn to listen. Is this going to be like the lamenting of the stone? Rabinoe asked. Because I don't have time to meditate for hours on end right now. Did I not just say this can be learned on the road? Eris snapped. Why must you always jump to brash conclusions? Because it's you, Rabinoe shot back. And I'd argue my conclusions are only brash if they are wrong, which most of the time they are not. Feeling a little full of yourself today, are you? Eris asked in an airy tone. Rabinoe sighed. Please forgive my haughty attitude, he said sarcastically. Please teach me how the wind can be my friend. I'm not sure I want to anymore, Eris said. And you call me impossible, Rabinoe rolled his eyes. Fine, she snapped. Sometimes I wonder why I bother. Rabinoe held out his hand and started ticking off on his fingers as he spoke. Sheer boredom, extreme sense of superiority, no choice. Just because I am tethered to your side, she began, does not mean I am forced to depart my knowledge with you. Yeah, Rabinoe replied, but I think you enjoy watching me struggle with new tasks. It can be rather entertaining, she conceded. Where was I? Oh, yes, the wind being your friend. So that's really a thing? Rabinoe asked. You're not just messing with me? Of course that's a real thing, Eris answered. Much like how you have expanded your awareness to be able to sense will magic being cast. If you open yourself to nature and learn her subtle ebbs and flows, a wealth of knowledge will be at your fingertips. Would I be able to control the wind? Rabinoe asked. Like, swoosh my arms and make a gust really hard? Nature does not readily bend its will to a human, Eris answered, or any living creature for that matter. No. If you develop enough of a relationship with the wind, you may be able to ask for its help in such manners. But it is entirely up to her whether or not she follows your wishes. Okay, Rabinoe said. So then what are the benefits of being friends with the wind? You would be amazed at what the wind can share with you, Rabbit, Eris replied. She sees nearly everything. If you ask nicely, she can tell you what is around you, much like expanding your awareness to sense will magic. But in this case, it would be to sense any living thing in the vicinity. That would have been incredibly helpful before excuse me. That would have been incredibly helpful before Dirkley dragged us to the capital, Rabinoe grumbled. I still don't understand how he was able to get so close to us without either of us hearing us approach. Hells, he was in the cart and I didn't even feel his weight. Dirkley is a man that walks in the shadows, Eris said. He specializes in stealth and assassination. We should count our blessings that he was only sent to retrieve us, not kill us. And it speaks to the king's respect for your abilities if he sent such a man to collect us. Would hearing the wind have helped in that situation? Rabinoe asked. Like, would I have known he was coming before he got in the bloody cart? Unlikely, Eris said darkly. Like I said, that man is a special breed of evil. That's a shame, Rabinoe said flatly. So then it seems like knowing the wind has some pretty drastic blind spots, huh? As does any ability, Rabbit, Eris shot back. Which is why I endeavor to teach you so many. If you have a plethora of tools at your disposal, the chances of you getting caught off guard again are slim. Was Linrem, friends with the wind? Eris was silent for a moment at the mention of Lynn. Yes, she said softly. Lynn was well versed in a great deal of magics and abilities. Okay then, Rabinoe said resolutely. How do I do it? First, Eris said, you must learn to listen and feel for the wind. All of your life, the wind has been a constant in nature, and as most things that occur in such a frequent scale, we learn to tune it out as background noise. You must learn to feel for every caress, every slight change in temperature and pressure. That doesn't sound so difficult, Rabinoe said. It's more challenging than you believe, Eris replied. It will be a constant task, much like keeping the wheels on this cart round. Well, Rabinoe said, you helped me learn that one. I imagine this will be no different. Don't get cocky, Eris shot back. This is a skill that took even Lynn a great deal of time to master. So what? Rabinoe asked. Do I expand my awareness like I do when I meditate or try to sense will magic? Not exactly, Eris answered. Those abilities are more used for your magical senses. Attuning to the wind will be akin to awakening a part of your brain that has been asleep for a very long time. Okay, Rabinoe said slowly. So how do I do it? I've already told you, Eris said cryptically. You need to learn how to be aware of the wind's every movement. Right, Rabinoe said. But there's no trick to it? No mindset I need to have to be successful? Start with this, Eris said. Every time you feel the wind, I want you to tap your finger on the handle of the cart. Okay, Rabinoe said. And so he did. For the next several minutes, Rabinoe tried to be as aware of the wind as he possibly could, tapping his finger on the hand cart every time it blew against him. After a while, Eris spoke once more. "You've got about 25%, she said. "It's more than just every time it touches you, Rabbit." "I'm trying," Rabinoe grumbled. "Try harder," she shot back. "You need to be able to sense more than the wind's movements. Changes in pressure and direction, temperature, and the strength at which it blows. These are all things you must be aware of." "How in the hells am I supposed to sense all of that?" Rabinoe asked. "Don't try to get it all at once," Eris advised. "Take it piece by piece. First, simply focus on its movements against your skin." The pair continued on like this for the remainder of the day, Rabinoe tapping on the handcart and Eris chastising him for his ineptitude. By the time Rabinoe set up camp that night, he had, in Eris's estimation, gone from 25% to around 35%. Rabinoe was growing frustrated at the slow pace of his advancement, but he was also beginning to understand the complexity of a thing he had taken for granted his entire life. Furthermore, his growing awareness of the presence of the wind brought with it the knowledge of the smells carried by the wind, something he had rarely given too much attention to, unless the smells were potent. More than anything, he was grateful to have something to dedicate his mind to, so as to not dwell on what had occurred in Ohangpor. The next morning, Rabinoe did his normal routine, breaking down the camp before settling in to meditate. While he meditated, flexing his will and expanding his awareness, he also tried to be cognizant of the awakening wind all around him. The breeze was playful this morning, almost as if it knew he was endeavoring to befriend it. It danced along his skin and teased at his unkempt hair, which was now reaching down towards his shoulders. He also tried to focus on what the wind carried with it: the chill of fresh dew, the smell of grass and trees, the pollen from blossoming flowers. He also smelled the dirt, earthy and heavy, as well as the fur of the small animals beginning to bustle all around him. When he tried to focus on the critters, he got a sense of squirrels, birds, rabbits, voles, and even a small group of deer that were bedded nearby. Smiling to himself, he arose from his meditation and struck out for the day, the sun breaching the horizon and greeting the world merrily. Eris began the day riding his shoulders, critiquing his ever-expanding knowledge of the wind's presence. Before long, however, she couldn't help but frolic amongst the bushes and trees, terrorizing the small creatures as she always did. When she returned, she didn't have any critters clamped in her jaws, but she purred contentedly as she resumed her mantle. As the morning crept towards midday, Rabinoe sensed that they were approaching a small town. Wood smoke, pungent and heavy, was carried along the breeze to tickle at his nose. Before long, the pair rolled into the bustling hamlet. The place was larger than the last few places they had been, though, of course, it paled in comparison to the capital. As he always did, Rabinoe struck out to find the local inn. Finding the quaint stone structure centrally located off of the main thoroughfare. He put his handcart in the little area that served as a stable, though no horses currently occupied the space, and went inside. The inn was neat and well kept, wooden tables spaced evenly throughout the main room, with matching chairs pushed neatly underneath them. The floor was made from planks of wood which were polished to an impeccable shine. A hearth blazed merrily at the other end of the room, and the innkeeper stood before it, stirring the flaming logs and humming cheerfully to himself. When he turned to face them, Rabinoe saw that the man was in his late 40s, his straw-colored hair beginning to silver at the temples. Deep crow's feet told of many years of smiles and laughs. He straightened as he saw Rabinoe, wiping the front of his apron, which hung over his ample gut, and smiled broadly. "Welcome, young man," he boomed, his voice resonating off of the stone walls. His smile seemed to brighten the room. "Welcome to Raven's Rest. I am the owner and proprietor, Mac Raven." He crossed the room in a few swift steps and offered a hand to Rabinoe, which he shook. "How can I help you this fine day?" The man's joviality was infectious, and Rabinoe felt himself smiling as well. "I am Rabinoe, Wizard Extraordinaire." "Wizard Extraordinaire, huh?" Mac chuckled. "Alrighty then. What brings you to Oaks Terrace?" "I'm on a pilgrimage to better my magic," and Rabinoe answered and shrugged. "This little town happened to be my next stop." Mac laughed loudly. "That would explain why you have a cat riding your shoulders. Must be a familiar of sorts." "You could say that," Rabinoe responded with a smile. "Her name is Eris." "Well, it is a pleasure to meet both you and little Miss Eris here," Mac boomed. "I take it you are seeking lodging?" "I am," Rabinoe nodded. "I was hoping to exchange my labor, either physical or magical, for room and board." "I see." Mac didn't seem to have a low volume at which he spoke. "Well, I'm sure I could scrounge up something for a young wizard and his feline friend." "I would certainly appreciate it," Rabinoe said. "This is a very nice inn you have here." "Thank you, young man," Mac beamed. "I take great pride in my inn. Hardly get too many travelers coming through nowadays, but the townsfolk love to come in the evenings to partake in my mead." He put his thumbs in his shoulder straps of his apron. "I'm actually quite well known for my mead." "Really?" Rabinoe asked. "Where do you make it? I mean no offense, but this place doesn't seem large enough to contain your inn and a brewery." Mac laughed raucously. "I do all of the brewing down in the basement. Main floor here is for entertaining. Got a small kitchen in the back, and all of the living quarters are upstairs." "Wow," Rabinoe remarked. "You really monopolize on your space." "Of course," Mac boomed. "Beyond making a living, I truly enjoy keeping myself busy. Brewing mead helps to occupy my idle hands." "I can relate," Rabinoe laughed. "Now that I think about it," Mac said, stroking his chin, "I'm actually due to take a shipment of my mead to our sister village, Oaks Folly. It's about a day's travel south from here. Think that might be something you can do?" "Sure," Rabinoe smiled widely. "That sounds easy enough." Mac laughed, his voice resonating off of the walls once more. "I like your enthusiasm, kid, but it won't be an easy task. I've got 4 barrels that need to go, and they're all about as big as you are." "Nothing I can't handle," Rabinoe said. "I've even got a handcart I can transport them in, as long as I have a safe place to put my belongings." Mac raised an eyebrow. "We'll see how you feel about a handcart once I bring up the barrels. If you can't fit them all in there, I have a wagon you can use, though I usually borrow an ass from one of the neighbors." "I'm sure I can make it work," Rabinoe assured the man. "Besides, I like a good challenge." Mac laughed raucously once more. "A man after my own heart. I like you, kid. Tell you what, it's a little too late in the day to begin the journey to Oaks Folly, excuse me. Why don't you give me a hand getting ready for this evening, and you can start fresh in the morning? I've got a pair of minstrels coming tonight, and the rafters are sure to be shaking with music and mirth." Rabinoe spent the rest of the day helping Mac. He scrubbed and polished the floors, as well as all of the little tables in the inn. He also helped Mac set up a small stage off to the side of the room for the minstrels to perform on. After that, Rabinoe mucked the stables, though they were fairly clean to begin with, and straightened up the guest rooms upstairs, picking one for himself and storing his meager belongings within. Once that was done, he was in the kitchen slicing and dicing vegetables for the large pot pies Mac was making for the evening. Working alongside Mac was a joy for Rabinoe. The man seemed eternally in high spirits, and his laughter was forever infectious. By the time the townsfolk started filtering into the inn after completing whatever tasks they had for themselves, the sun was beginning to set, and Rabinoe felt the exhaustion that came with a day's hard work. He picked a table in the back corner, tucking into a steaming pot pie of his own, and watched as the place filled to capacity. Not long after, the minstrels arrived, which turned out to be a pair, a man and a woman. They were both young, looking to be in their early 20s, and looked so alike, Rabinoe could have sworn they were twins. They both had flaming red hair and fair complexion, which made every expression they made sparkle. The pair spoke with Mac briefly before taking to the stage. The man produced a small set of drums, 4 of them of different size and timbre, all secured together in a small arc by a decorative rope, and set them into his lap reverently, pulling a pair of drumsticks from his coat. The woman brought out a dark leather case that held her fiddle and the bow with which she played. After a moment of tuning the instruments, the pair began. The music that filled the little inn was loud and amazingly good. The drums never overpowered the fiddle, and the instruments sank into a harmony Rabinoe could feel reverberating through the space. And then the woman began to sing. Her voice was mesmerizing. Afterwards, Rabinoe wouldn't be able to recall a single song that they played, only that she sang it with passion and perfection. The music filled the inn, and soon tables were shuffled to the side of the room and the townsfolk began to dance merrily. The pair played for hours, non-stop, sliding seamlessly from one song to the next. Rabinoe was thoroughly impressed with the pair of them and decided that they must have been playing together for a very long time. The evening turned to night, and mead flowed freely throughout the goblets the townsfolk held. Rabinoe remarked that Mac had been right. The rafters were surely shaking with music and mirth as the pair played and the people danced with abandon. Rabinoe went to bed that night, long into the late hours, smiling and humming to himself. It had been a wonderful day. When Rabinoe awoke the next morning and came down to the main room of the inn, he found Mac already up and about, whistling to himself as he made breakfast. The man grinned broadly as Rabinoe came into the kitchen. "Ah," he boomed, "the prodigal mage awakens! Come, take a seat and have some coffee while I finish making breakfast. I've got bacon and eggs and sausage and what is sure to be the best damn pancakes you've ever tasted." Rabinoe did, sitting at the small table scooted into the corner of the room, and watched as Mac moved in a flurry, fluidly going from one pan to the next on the massive stove that took up most of one side of the room. Rabinoe poured himself a cup of coffee from the kettle that sat on the table and remarked at how good it was. Everything Mac made seemed to be tuned to perfection. Soon, the man had 2 plates overflowing with food, sitting one before Rabinoe and one before himself, sitting across from Rabinoe at the small table. He pointed a thumb over his shoulder. "I left a plate on the floor over there for your kitty," he beamed. "Not quite the feast we have before us, but I imagine it will suit her nonetheless." Rabinoe didn't even have to say anything to Eris. She bounded from his shoulders and quickly found the plate stacked high with steaming meats. Together, the 3 dug in. As they ate, Rabinoe remarked at how skilled the minstrels had been. "Aye," Mac nodded, speaking around a mouthful of eggs and toast. "I've had them coming to perform in the inn for a few years now, and they've only gotten better." "Are they twins?" Rabinoe asked. "I'm not sure about that," Mac answered, "but they are definitely kin, brother and sister at the very least. Look too damn alike for it to be any different." "What are their names?" Rabinoe's curiosity was getting the best of him. "She's May. Mac answered around bites. He's Todd. Like to be called the Flaming Songsmiths. A fitting name, if you ask me. Rabinoe agreed. They finished eating their feast of a breakfast, and Mac took Rabinoe down to the basement, where he brewed his mead. The space was easily as wide as the first floor in its entirety, and was full of wooden casks, some empty, and a great deal of them stacked on the shelves that spanned an entire wall. A great big iron pot stood in the middle of the room, currently empty, but clearly where the man brewed his famous elixirs. Bags and boxes of goods lined the wall opposite the shelves and seemed to contain all of the supplies the man needed to make whatever his heart desired. Mac showed Rabinoe the 4 casks already set aside for him, and they were indeed nearly as tall as Rabinoe, and wide enough that he could barely wrap his arms halfway around them. Mac helped him take the casks up through a pair of doors that led directly to the stables, and loaded them into Rabinoe's small handcart. It was a tight fit, but they managed to lay 2 along the bottom and stack the other 2 on top, strapping them down with a netting of ropes that kept the barrels in place. "Now, are you sure you don't want me to fetch one of the neighbor's donkeys?" Mac asked. "That's a lot of weight in that cart." Rabinoe smiled. "I think I can handle it." He winked at the man. "Don't forget that I'm a wizard after all." Mac laughed raucously and slapped a meaty hand on Rabinoe's shoulder. "All right then, Mr. Extraordinaire. I leave the task to you. Just follow the road south out of town, and as long as you maintain a decent pace, you should reach Oaks Folly by nightfall." Rabinoe nodded, Eris jumping to his shoulders as he took hold of the cart, working his will into the wheels to make them round once more. With a wave, Max saw them off, and together Rabinoe and Eris began their journey to Oaks Folly. End. Episode 20. Whispers on the Wind. I hope you are enjoying what you are listening and watching to. If you are, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and tune in every Sunday morning at 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time when I release new episodes. Thank you so much for listening, and have a wonderful day.